Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. So great being with all of you today. I am Gillian Connor. I am the very proud principal of KIPP DC Northeast Academy. This is my 19th year in education, and it's been a joy to spend 17 of those here at KIPP DC. I've had about every job that we have, and I love being a principal and think that getting to be a part of our schools is the most special thing anybody can do. So I'm excited to have you all learn from us and talk with us today. Just a couple of logistics before we get going. Please only use the chat when asked to by the presenters. Please enter any questions as you have them in the Q&A box, and we'll answer some questions as we go, but save others until the end. And this afternoon, we're going to do a short overview of KIPP DC, jump right into culturally relevant literacy, get in some Q&A, and then break out rooms as well. Excited to get going. Okay, so we started KIPP DC back in 2001. I had the distinct pleasure to join in 2004, and you can see all of our kids here like so excited to learn. Ms. Campbell, in fact, was a part of this founding year. And since then, we have grown tremendously to where we are now 20 schools, 7,300 students, 1,300 staff, and over 2,500 alumni. Getting to be a part of this journey for most of KIPP DC has been like the biggest honor of my entire life. I'm excited that I get to work with many of my alumni as my teachers and my staff, and to now be serving the children of students I used to teach. I think we do wonderful things, and it's just an honor to get to be on this journey with KIPP DC. As our progression has gone, we have expanded mainly across the city. We started over on Minnesota Avenue, but we have grown tremendously where we now serve predominantly Ward 7 and 8, but many other places. I have the pleasure to be on the web campus this year, but I've had a chance to work at almost all of them. We are just wonderful and get to work very collaboratively across many ages with families at each of our campuses, and get to do great things. You can also see this represented where we have grown to have many schools, where we have ECE elementary and middle as our main hubs in our campus, and now have expanded to have not one, but two high schools. Our mission has always been that we are going to be together with our families and communities where we create joyful, academically excellent schools that prepare students with the skills and confidence to pursue the paths they choose, college, career, and beyond, so they can lead fulfilling lives and build a more just world. Our mission has changed a little over the years, but always been rooted in doing what is best for our kids. And I think we continue to show up and do that every single day in many ways. We're going to talk about that through the lens of culturally relevant literacy today, which I think plays an important part in this mission. But overall, we get to show up as educators and just do great things for our kids every day so that they can do great things in their lives. Through this, we have also reflected on our own practices a lot. And have really sort of like looked at where we are at 25 years. A core piece that me and the rest of the people who work from an academic perspective have zoomed in on is enhancing student learning and experience. You're going to hear that a lot about that today. We work through lots of other perspectives as well to cultivate new ideas, invest in our people. But really, for the majority of the people focused at KIPP, we are thinking critically every day about how we can make our student learning and experience better, particularly through literacy. And with that, I'm excited for you guys to meet some amazing women who work on this every day. So first and foremost, Liz Strebel, our Senior Managing Director of Literacy and Humanities, who has done an amazing job transforming the way that we think about literacy, teach literacy, and get our kids to become not just great at one grade level, but ultimately becoming lifelong readers. Also have the pleasure to work with two of our literacy coaches, Miss Boyd in the elementary land and Miss Salgado, both who've done tremendous work helping our teachers become better teachers. And I think one of the distinct advantages of KIPP DC is the amount of wraparound support that we give our teachers, not just directly from people like me, but from other coaches at a network level to help people build their own content expertise as well. They are all amazing, and it's going to be great for everyone to hear from them today.
Thank you, Gillian. Welcome, everyone. Our team is excited to share about our work to create a more culturally relevant literacy experience for all of our students at KIPP DC. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of our journey, let's get our minds into the work. I borrowed this activity transparently from Dr. Gloria Ladstone-Billings, who works with our organization in our pursuit of the best culturally relevant experience for our students. She's the true GOAT of culturally responsive teaching. So if you're not familiar with her work, get one of her books, watch her on YouTube. She's extraordinary. But this is an activity that she uses really to help us understand how your culture impacts your perspective. So we're going to play a game called What Do You See? I'm going to put an image on the screen, and then you're going to say out loud, although it might be a little awkward in front of your computer, you're going to say out loud what you see. What do you see? If you're a resident of the Mid-Atlantic like myself, you call these soda. If you're in the Midwest, you might call it pop. And if you're in the Deep South, you might call it soda pop. None of these descriptions are wrong. It just depends on the vernacular of the region that you live. And that is just what you call it. Let's try it again. What do you see? If you're a native New Yorker like myself, you call this a hero. But today, the most common term to use to describe meat and vegetables in between two pieces of oblong bread is a sub, because of its likeness to a submarine. If your family is from Philly, you may call this a hoagie. Or if your family is from New England, you may call it a grinder. They're all correct. They're just dependent upon your location, and in some cases your age, and in terms of what you call this. Let's try it one more time. What do you see? Is the cat going up or down the stairs? We just launched a poll to see how each of us sees this. Go ahead and take a dip. What do you see? Oh, it looks like we're just about split. We have 60% of us thinking that is walking up the stairs, and 40% thinking that this is a cat walking down the stairs. The great thing is there's no right answer. All three of these images, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just dependent upon your perspective and specifically your culture. Culture is more than just our race and ethnicity. It's our gender, age, geography, orientation, socioeconomic status, and it impacts the way we see and talk about the world around us. This activity illustrates one of the greatest takeaways from our journey to create a more culturally relevant curriculum. The more perspectives you have at the table and the more diverse their cultures, the stronger product you achieve. Let's get into our curriculum journey. Before we go any deeper, I want to make sure we're clear on some common definitions for terminology you're going to hear throughout this evening's presentation. At KIPP DC, we define responsive teaching as a pedagogy that empowers students intellectually, socially, and emotionally, and affirms their cultural identities for the purposes of building and bridging to success in the culture of academia and mainstream society, while developing critical perspective that challenge inequities. We also believe that historically responsive literacy is built on 4 layers or 4 pursuits, learning pursuits: identity, skills, intellect, criticality, and joy. And finally, we use the rings of culture from Dr. Sharokky Hollie's Culturally and Linguistically Responsive Teaching and Learning, where he defines the rings of culture to include age, orientation, nationality, socioeconomic status, religion, gender, and ethnicity. The rings of culture anchor his responsive dots protocol for text evaluation that we use throughout this process. These definitions and tools guided our work to cultivate a more cultural literacy curriculum for all of our students. Our journey has been long. We've been doing this for a couple of years, but it really began in 2019 when our fourth graders read a Scholastic article about Marley Diaz. They learned about the 1,000 Black Girl book campaign she launched because she was tired of reading books about white boys and dogs. She created a hashtag and collected books featuring characters of color to create a database other children could access to order books. Her advocacy sparked curiosity in our students and made them ask, how many books in our libraries feature a person or people of color? Fourth grade students across our regions inventoried their classroom libraries, created graphs, and ultimately wrote persuasive letters requesting more books featuring main characters of color. This project sparked a broader inquiry in all first through eighth grade classrooms. Did feature a person or people of color. The results were only 31%. Only 31% of the books featured characters of color, yet 99% of our students identify as African American or Black. Unequivocally, we decided the books in our classrooms must represent our students' identities. And that was just the start of a journey to redesign how we approach literacy learning in our schools. We relied on two key levers to redesign our curriculum: committees of diverse educators and research-based tools. During the virtual teaching and learning year, one of the silver linings was the ease by which we could assemble educators. KIPP DC formed curriculum committees in elementary, middle, and high school to study culturally responsive literacy practices and audit, design, and revise our units. We used 3 different tools at each stage of the process. First, we used NYU's culturally responsive curriculum scorecard, which informed a lot of our unit revision work. We used Dr. Hollie's Rings of Culture and Responsive Dots protocol to inform our text evaluation and selection. And most frequently and most recently, we studied and applied Dr. Muhammad's equity framework from historically responsive literacy instruction to shape our units and our approach to lesson planning. In the 2021 school year, we assembled 51 teachers, leaders, and coaches to work and audit and design and revise 18 units. In the 21-22 school year, we added 35 more educators to that work to design and revise 13 additional units. And this past year, we added 12 more teachers and leaders and coaches to work in committee, which resulted in 36 units revised and intentionally designed with these tools. And 90% of our anchor text featured a person or people of color as main characters. Members of our curriculum committee use these tools to redesign how students experience literacy in our classrooms every day. We're now going to have the coaches share a little bit more about the specifics around unit design. Amy's going to walk you through our middle school unit design. Then Phaedra is going to walk you through our elementary school lesson design. And then we're going to wrap up with big takeaways. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy to take us through the middle school unit design.
Thank you, Liz. We're very excited to be here, and I'm particularly excited to introduce the middle school work. And so in our journey, in our middle school journey toward building an anti-racist curriculum, we backwards mapped using the equity framework from Cultivating Genius and the Rings of Culture from Dr. Hollie, as you heard Liz mention. Our intent was to design a curriculum that both met the rigorous demands of our students is always a top priority for us, and also one that is culturally responsive. Let's focus in on the equity framework that we've talked about. Here are the pursuits and the description of each. Please take a few minutes to read each pursuit and their descriptions so that you can come along the work with me. Hopefully that was enough time. If not, we'll get another chance to look at these again. When using this framework for us, we decided to keep our students' identities top of mind. That was our priority. We also kept social times, historical and current, as a priority to think about which text may represent these. And as we were building and using this framework, as we were building our curriculum and using these frameworks, we realized that the most important stakeholders, our staff and our students, needed to be involved in this design. And so for starters, we had all of our teachers read Cultivating Genius so that we can have one voice. All of us had the same definition and same practices. Then we organized literacy committees and invited teachers from each grade level. Together, we took on the work to look for texts that could help us highlight each of these pursuits. We fell in love with a lot of books, but we realized that that was not quite enough just yet. And so, before making final decisions, as you can see here, for each of our texts, for each of our units in each grade level, we went back to the Rings of Culture by Dr. Hollie. We hope that this framework would help us build a curriculum that was representative of all of our students and staff. Our goal was that by the end of each grade level, and ultimately by the end of a student's KIPP DC experience, that they would have had exposure to a wide range of characters and individuals who represent diverse aspects of each of the Rings of Culture. So let's go behind the scenes with one example. We're going to look at 8th grade, and we're going to look at one of our units, Deep Study of Character. Before we embarked on this work, we started building our curriculum and our units by looking at the standards. We studied these and we looked at rigor and how we can push our students. Then we looked across the nation to see which novels, which texts could fit this unit. And we found To Kill a Mockingbird. Many of you are probably familiar with this. I grew up learning from it, and many of us did, and we identify with the book. And to us at that time, it was really important that we found a book that aligned to Common Core standards and that it could help us build a curriculum that raised the stakes for our students, but also one that was engaging. In contrast, when we started our journey towards building a curriculum that exemplify our students' identities and our staff identities, we first started looking at our equity framework and the Rings of Culture. And in our literacy committee, we realized that our students could not identify with the characters or the setting of To Kill a Mockingbird. And so we went on together to look for texts that would identify characters and struggles that our students could connect to. It was also important for us to think critically, to have texts that allow our students to think critically about events and situations that may impact their community and the world around them so that they could be change makers. During our search, we also kept our standards in mind because that never went away. But now it was a combination. Early on, we fell in love with Clap When You Land for many reasons. One of which was their characters. 2 teenagers, one living in New York City and one in the Dominican Republic, our students could connect to, but also learn from. This book also has a compelling storyline that our students can learn from. And so to match the themes of the unit and the demands of the unit, we asked our students to write poems about a setting that was important to them, a setting that had impacted their lives, just like the setting was very important in the book Clap When You Land. Our students wrote about many things, some of which included writing about the intersection of loving their neighborhood, but also hating the violence that they have become familiar with. They also wrote about music in Washington, DC, and what makes it unique. They wrote about go-go music and how they identified with it. They also wrote about change, including factors like gentrification and how the neighborhood that their grandparents, their parents, and that now they know has changed. We learned through this process that by keeping the equity framework and the rings of culture in mind throughout each step of the curriculum design, our students were able to respond more critically and creatively. So thank you for coming along to our middle school journey. Now it's time for a reflection. Here's a question that we have for you. How do you think our shift to a more culturally relevant literacy program impacted our students' learning experiences? Take a few moments to think about this question, and when you're ready, type your responses in the chat. Loving some of the responses that I'm seeing. Increased engagement, absolutely, absolutely. Students wanted to know what happened next in the text. They almost felt like these characters were real and that they lived right next door to them. I love this last response, connection to the writing. Our students were able to see how this storyline also fit perhaps their own storyline, and were able to respond critically. Thank you so much for your responses. And Phaedra, passing it on to you.
Thanks, Amy. Now let's take a look at our elementary journey towards a culturally responsive curriculum, and more specifically, our lesson application. It started with shifting to the science of reading and the research behind how students actually learn to read. To do this, we began studying Dr. Scarborough's reading rope and the science of reading. The rope conveys how the different strands of reading are all interconnected, yet independent of one another. For many scholars, learning to read is a real challenge, and Scarborough's rope captures this complexity. We learned when all these parts intertwine, it results in skilled, accurate, fluent reading with strong comprehension. After studying and learning from this rope, we started making adjustments to our elementary lessons to focus more on language comprehension. This had us examine the curriculum structure and the daily lessons we put in front of scholars. So our lessons now focus on students gaining language comprehension through read-alouds. Students become skilled readers this way. We shifted our lessons from a skill-based and strategy-based focus to a vocabulary and background knowledge focus. We started this work last year with our first grade unit that was all about insects. Students studied different insects, their habitats, and an insect's qualifications. Scholars had a first-hand experience with a butterfly's life cycle in their classrooms. This year, we continued our vocabulary and background knowledge building with revamping additional units across 1st through 4th grades to be more thematic. After the shift from skill to vocabulary, we then applied tools from the equity framework so that not only were we working on the science of reading, but we began our work being a more relevant curriculum for our students as well. So as you can see here, it was important to the curriculum committee as we revamped units to focus on vocabulary and knowledge building, that they were culturally relevant to our specific student population and their age group. So this picture here shows some of the units that we have completed. I wanted to highlight the African Folktales unit and the Issues and Activists unit. During the African Folktales unit, scholars were introduced to folktales that originated from various African countries. An African griot came to many schools and students learned the history and importance of oral storytelling. Throughout the halls, you could hear students wanting to share their stories of their families orally with each other. Students then wrote their own folk tales with a trickster of their own. The Issues and Activists unit are in our second grade classrooms, and already teachers are informing us of how students are identifying issues in their community that they want to improve. Just this past week, a teacher stopped me and was excited to share that through our Issues and Activists unit, a second grader now understood why Little Baby was so mad in his song. So these are just a few of the ways that our culturally relevant units are impacting scholars. Our shifts within our units then led us to revise our instructional lesson plans. After thorough review, we decided that it was important to include Gholdy Muhammed's pursuits at the beginning of each lesson. This shows how each specific pursuit shows up in each lesson. So the top of our lesson plans are showing there an emoji with the pursuit and student-friendly language of how the pursuits will appear in the lesson. Then throughout the lessons, you'll note emojis are seen that correlate to the pursuits where they specifically show up. This way of lesson planning shifted us to be more extremely intentional with not just our overall units, but our day-to-day delivery of lessons with the pursuits in the forefront. So through all of this, we have learned a lot. So we want to share our big takeaways with you. First, we learned that it's important to have many voices and diverse perspectives in order to enhance our curriculum. We did this by having various perspectives and voices amplified in our lessons. Since we are the writers of our own curriculum, this is extremely important. This shows you our most recent curriculum committee. We had a wide range of voices as members. We're from 5 elementary and middle schools across our network. The members had various background educations, ranging from 2 years of experience to more than 20 years of educational experience. This committee was essential in ensuring that our curriculum was culturally responsive. Now, Amy's going to tell you about our next big takeaway.
Thank you, Phaedra. So for our second takeaway, we learned that by leaning on expert scholars, and this is important, and by committing to their work throughout each stage of our unit design, we created a curriculum that was representative of many voices from our students and staff. And by starting with each of these frameworks and practices, it helped us build a curriculum that is now flexible and innovative. Liz will take us to our next takeaway.
Our final takeaway is that the goal is not perfection. And this is really what has been a journey for us and will continue to be. We focused on the process more than on the product, so we could learn along the way. And each year we've learned more, we've tried new things and made adjustments, and each iteration has had more impact on students. We'll keep learning and adjusting to enhance our students' literacy learning experience. So if you're an EC or elementary or middle school or high school teacher and you're interested in this work, please join in KIPP DC so you can be a member of the next iteration of curriculum committee members. High school revision is the top of our list next year. So if you're a high school teacher, even added bonus. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Sarah to finish us out.